Seizure. I don't remember the first moment it began, only the creeping sensation that something was quietly pressing into the edges of my life, like water seeping into the cracks of a foundation. The house was never loud, but it had its character. The way the floorboards flexed in the hall, the way the walls seemed to sigh at night as though the plaster itself was exhaling. At first, those noises were background to everything else. Familiar, comfortable, and then slowly they began to feel like a pulse. The place had been mine for only 3 months when the first tremor struck. Not in the earth, but in the body of the house. I was sitting on the floor with boxes still half unpacked, the smell of stale cardboard thick in the air, when I felt the vibrations crawl beneath me. At first, I thought it was something outside, maybe a truck rolling past, but there was no engine, no wheels on asphalt. Just a rhythm, low and primal, echoing from deep within the timber. It was as if the house itself had a heartbeat, one that stumbled and then quickened, spilling into my bones until I almost matched it without meaning to. The nights grew longer in that place. The windows never quite sealed, and so the wind whispered constantly through the frames. It brought with it the scent of damp earth from the yard, the sourness of rotting leaves clinging to the air like mildew. Sometimes I thought the draft carried more than just the smell of soil. It carried a weight, a heaviness that clung to my skin the way sweat does when you're fevered. I began waking up at odd hours, always with the taste of copper in my mouth, as if I'd been biting down on a coin in my sleep. My jaw would ache, my tongue sore, and my sheets tangled around me like restraints. I told myself it was stress, that the move and the solitude were gnawing at me. But there was always that other sensation, the faint tremor in the wood, as though the house itself shuddered whenever my eyes snapped open. Light never behaved normally there. During the day, the windows gave too little, as if the glass filtered out brightness and left only a gray pall that spread across the rooms. At night, every bulb seemed to hum, not with electricity but with something heavier, a vibration that filled the silence in place of comfort. Shadows stretched too far along the walls, their edges shivering as though uncertain of their shape. I often caught myself staring at them, waiting for them to break loose. It was the stairwell that unnerved me most. Narrow, steep, built with wood so old it carried the scent of rot even after years of polish. The 13th step always sagged deeper than the rest, groaning underfoot, but sometimes, late at night, it would creak without anyone near it. The sound carried up through the air, like a throat clearing in the dark. I'd hold my breath, muscles tight, listening for the continuation that never came. The house never gave more than it wanted to. The first true seizure came when I was sitting in the kitchen. It was near midnight, the bulb above me buzzing faintly, and I was drinking water from a glass that smelled faintly of iron, as if the pipes were bleeding into it. The tremor began again, only stronger this time, rattling the cupboard doors, making the silverware chatter against each other in shallow drawers. My hand went numb around the glass, and before I could react, the water spilled down my shirt. My chest tightened, my teeth ground together so hard I thought they'd crack. The room blurred at the edges, the walls bending inward like they were collapsing toward me. When it stopped, I was on the floor, cheek pressed against cold linoleum, the taste of blood filling my mouth from a bitten lip. My body still shook, as though I had been a puppet violently jerked on strings and then dropped. The air reeked of ozone, sharp and metallic, as if lightning had just split the room apart, though there had been no storm, no sound of rain, no flash outside. Only silence, and the faint moan of the refrigerator like some distant animal. I didn't go to the doctor. I couldn't. Something in me knew that what had happened wasn't in my body alone. It had come from the house, and I was only the vessel. My hands trembled as I traced the walls, fingertips dragging across paint that felt damp though it was dry. The texture was uneven, as though the walls were breathing beneath the plaster, expanding and contracting with each invisible inhalation. Nights became a series of awakenings. My body would lock itself in place, arms rigid, throat clenched, as invisible hands seemed to tighten around me. I would lie there, unable to scream, unable to breathe, while the air filled with a static crackle. My vision would vibrate, objects doubling and blurring as though the room itself was shaking in tandem with my convulsions. When release came, it was sudden, dropping me into a heap, sweat pooling in the hollow of my neck. Each time, I could hear faint whispers in the corners of the room, fragments of syllables that slid against each other like teeth grinding. The house was consuming me. I tried leaving once, packed a small bag, keys clenched so tight they left imprints in my palm. But when I reached the door, the handle refused to turn. It wasn't locked. I could see the mechanism shift under my own hand, yet the door would not yield. My body tightened, chest seizing, vision pulsing. I dropped to my knees as another fit tore through me. By the time it passed, the door stood open just a crack, letting in the faint smell of night air. I didn't move through it. Something in that moment told me the outside wasn't meant for me anymore. Time ceased to function normally. Days bled into nights without meaning, and I stopped counting how often I woke on the floor, muscles twitching, skin scraped from convulsions. The mirrors in the house grew unreliable. Sometimes they refused to show me at all, leaving only a trembling shadow where my body should have been. Other times they lingered too long, reflecting movements I hadn't made. The final seizure didn't feel like an attack. It felt like an embrace. I was standing in the stairwell, staring at the sagging 13th step, when the tremor began again. It started deep beneath the wood, a rolling shudder that rose into me, spreading through bone and sinew. My body went rigid, arms outstretched, mouth opening not in scream but in surrender. The light overhead burst, showering glass across my shoulders, though I felt none of the cuts. Everything inside me vibrated, not in pain but in perfect unison. The walls shook, dust falling like gray snow, and for a moment, I could feel the house breathing through me. The convulsion was no longer mine. It was ours, a shared rhythm, a single body quaking together. When it ended, I didn't fall. I stood, but something had shifted. The silence no longer pressed against me. It lived within me, a constant tremor beneath the skin. My hands no longer felt like mine. The pulse of the house ran through them. The seizure had not broken me. It had claimed me. And now, when the 13th step groans in the dark, it no longer frightens me. It calls me. It reminds me that I am no longer a tenant in this place. I am part of it, and it is part of me. Asphyxia. It began with the air. At first, I thought it was just the dampness that seemed to linger in every old English house, the heaviness of old stone walls sucking in rain and refusing to let it go. The smell was faint, something between mildew and rust, a metallic sourness that clung to the back of the throat. But after the first few nights in that house, I noticed the air wasn't just damp. It was thick. Breathing felt different inside those rooms. Each inhale dragged slowly, as though the atmosphere resisted me, like lungs struggling to pull syrup instead of oxygen. My chest rose, but it was never enough, and every breath left me craving another, and then another, until I was dizzy with the effort. The house itself wasn't remarkable. A two-story structure at the end of a narrow road, set back behind a low stone wall choked with ivy. Its windows had been painted shut long ago, and the glass bore the wavering warps of an older age. Inside, everything smelled of dust that no amount of sweeping could tame. Dust in the curtains, dust in the wood, dust woven into the carpet fibers so deeply that every step released a faint puff into the air, visible only when sunlight angled through the gloom. But the sun never seemed to linger. Even at midday, the house held shadows in its corners, pooling along the baseboards, stretching up into the rafters. Light filtered in weak and pale, always muted, as though something outside was pressing down on the house, smothering it beneath a gray shroud. I told myself I was just adjusting, that old houses have their quirks. Yet the longer I stayed, the more the air itself seemed to close around me. There were times I would wake in the middle of the night with my mouth open, chest heaving, every muscle straining as though I had been drowning in my sleep. My throat burned raw, tongue swollen with dryness, even though sweat clung to my skin in sticky sheets. The walls exhaled with me. I could hear it, that soft hiss when I tried to catch my breath, as if the plaster itself was breathing in tandem, pulling air away from me, leaving only scraps to fight over. Each room carried its own suffocation. The kitchen always smelled faintly of gas, though every pipe had been inspected and found intact. The odor would come in waves, sometimes so strong it made my eyes water, then vanish just as quickly. I would stand there, leaning on the counter, feeling my lungs struggle while the ceiling light above buzzed faintly, its glow flickering like it too was starving for something unseen. The bedroom was worse. The air grew stillest there. When I lay in bed, it felt like the ceiling sagged closer with each passing hour, pressing down on my chest, forcing my breath shallow. The windows were useless. They rattled in their frames at night as though begging to be opened, but no matter how I pried, the paint held them sealed, trapping everything inside. I began to notice other changes. My reflection dulled in the mirror above the dresser, my skin waxy and gray, lips tinged with a faint blue. I chalked it up to exhaustion, but deep down I knew it was something more. The house was bleeding the breath from me, little by little. Nights stretched into feverish half-sleep. I would wake gasping, throat raw, chest aching. Sometimes my vision swam, the ceiling rippling like water overhead. At the edges of the blur, shadows shifted, thin and sinuous, curling upward like smoke. I would try to move, but my limbs lay heavy, pinned beneath invisible weight, lungs straining against an unseen grip. The harder I fought to draw air, the tighter the pressure grew, as though the house itself was teaching me to surrender. It wasn't just sleep. During the day, too, I would catch myself pausing in a room, holding still, realizing I had been forgetting to breathe. Seconds would stretch, lungs screaming, until I coughed and dragged in air sharp enough to burn. The sound would echo in the silence, harsh and desperate, and I swear the walls seemed to vibrate faintly at the noise, like they were listening. I tried leaving once, packed a bag, convinced myself it was just the house making me ill. But the moment I stepped outside, the air felt too thin, too light, as though my lungs no longer remembered how to handle it. Each breath was shallow, unsatisfying, and I doubled over on the front path, dizzy and gasping, desperate to get back inside where the air, though heavy and wrong, felt familiar. I stumbled back through the door, and only then did my chest ease, as though the house had reclaimed me. That was when I knew. It wasn't simply that the air inside was poisoned. The house was conditioning me, reshaping me to belong to it. The final nights blurred together. I stopped fighting sleep, even though I knew what waited. Darkness pressed against me like a hand, covering mouth and nose, sinking into me. I felt myself slipping deeper each time, lungs moving slower, body surrendering more. Breathing became an afterthought, something irrelevant. One night I woke and realized I wasn't breathing at all. My chest lay still, no rise, no fall. Yet I didn't panic. I only listened to the silence, to the faint groan of beams above, to the weight of the house pressing down. My body tingled faintly, vision spotted, but I felt no urge to gasp. The house had taken the work from me, drawing the air itself through me like a puppet's strings, letting me float weightless within its suffocating embrace. And then came the whisper. Not words, not exactly. Just a vibration in the air, a hum that rattled the glass in the window frames, sank into the marrow of my bones. It pulsed once, twice, and my lungs moved in perfect unison. Not of my own will, but of the house's command. Breathing was no longer mine. I still walk the halls sometimes, though I do not remember when I last left the bed. The air carries me, pushes and pulls with each step, guiding me like a current. The windows no longer rattle, the doors no longer beckon. Everything is still, silent. The house exhales through me now. And I know when the final breath comes, it will not be mine to release. It will belong only to the walls, the plaster, the dust. It will belong to Asphyxia.